The man decided to test his wife's loyalty with a farewell letter saying he was leaving her. He hid in the closet and waited. He was shocked when he saw. The Texan afternoon sun seeped through the gaps in the shutters, creating a pattern of light and shadow on the kitchen table. Daniel, sitting quietly, watched his wife Olivia, absorbed in her work. Her fingers danced over the laptop keyboard with a grace he envied. There was a time when he felt as secure as she seemed now, as confident in her place in the world and in their relationship. But today, on this muggy July afternoon, Daniel felt like a ghost in his own home. Invisible, insignificant, a shadow of the man he used to be. He snorted, hoping to catch Olivia's eye. She looked up briefly, offered a distracted smile, and went back to work. That smile, which had once lit up his world, now seemed empty, devoid of the warmth that had once made him feel loved. Daniel stood up, his chair scraping the wooden floor. Olivia didn't even move. He walked over to the sink, filled a glass of water, and drank it in one gulp, as if he could drown out the knot forming in his throat. "Liv," he called softly. "Do you have a minute?" She murmured, her eyes still fixed on the screen. "Sorry, love. I'm in the middle of something important. Can you hold on?" Daniel nodded, even though he knew she wouldn't see. "Of course," he replied, his voice almost a whisper. "No problem." He left the kitchen, his footsteps echoing through the silent house. In the hallway, he stopped in front of a photo of the two of them, taken a few years ago during a trip to the beach. Wide smiles, sparkling eyes, skin tanned by the sun. They looked so happy, so in love. What had changed? In his office, Daniel sat down at his desk, pulled out a sheet of paper and a pen. The words began to flow, bringing to the surface all the insecurities and fears he had been harboring for months. "Dear Olivia, when was the last time you really saw me? Not just looked in my direction, but really saw me. I remember a time when your eyes would light up when I entered the room, when my voice was enough to bring a smile to your face. Now it seems like I'm just another piece of furniture in the house, something you're so used to seeing that you don't even notice anymore. Maybe it's my fault. Maybe I've become uninteresting, predictable, or maybe you've simply stopped loving me. Either way, I can't go on living like this, feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. So I'm leaving. Not forever, at least not yet. But I need you to feel my absence. I need to know if you'll miss me, if you'll realize the void I'll leave behind. Maybe then you'll remember what we had, what we lost. I'll be at the lake house for a few days. If you miss me, if you realize that you still love me, come and get me. If not, well, I guess we'll have our answer. With all the love I still have, Daniel." He reread the letter, each word weighing heavily on his heart. It was drastic, he knew, but he felt he had no choice. He had to do something, anything, to shake the apathy that had settled between them. Daniel folded the letter carefully and put it in an envelope. He wrote Olivia's name on the front in shaky handwriting. He stood up, ready to put it on the bed and leave, when he heard the noise of the washing machine being turned on. A sudden thought struck him. What if, before he left, he could catch a glimpse of how Olivia would react? If he could be sure that she really cared? Driven by an impulse he barely understood, Daniel headed for the laundry room. The room was small, dominated by the washing machine and a built-in cupboard. Without a second thought, he ducked into the cupboard, closing the door behind him. The space was cramped and dark, smelling of fabric softener and clean laundry. Daniel settled between the folded towels, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew what he was doing was crazy, an invasion of privacy, but he couldn't help himself. He needed to know. The minutes dragged by. Daniel could hear the hum of the washing machine, the occasional clink of dishes coming from the kitchen. He began to question his decision, wondering how he would explain his presence there if he were discovered. Then he heard footsteps approaching. The laundry room door opened, and he held his breath. Through the gaps in the cupboard, he saw Olivia enter. She looked different. Her shoulders were slumped, her face tense. She picked up her cell phone and dialed a number. "Sophie?" Olivia's voice sounded shaky. "Can you come? I need to talk." Daniel felt his heart squeeze. Olivia looked so vulnerable, so sad. He had never seen her like this before. Or maybe he had, but hadn't paid attention. While waiting for Sophie to arrive, Olivia sat on the floor of the laundry room, leaning against the wall. Daniel watched her helplessly, wanting to get out of the closet and comfort her. But something kept him paralyzed. Minutes later, the doorbell rang. Olivia got up, wiped her eyes, and went to answer it. Daniel heard muffled voices approaching, and then Sophie and Olivia entered the laundry room. "What's going on, Liv?" Sophie asked, her voice full of concern. Olivia let out a deep sigh. "It's Daniel," she began, and Daniel felt his heart leap. "I don't know what to do anymore, Sophie. It's like he's disappearing in front of me and I can't reach him." Daniel remained motionless, hardly daring to breathe. Olivia's words echoed in his ears, challenging everything he believed was happening in his marriage. "What do you mean?" Sophie asked softly. "He's always so distant, so closed off," Olivia continued, her voice embittered. "I try to talk to him. I try to get closer, but it's like there's a wall between us. I can't read his thoughts anymore. I don't know how he feels." Daniel felt a wave of guilt wash over him. All this time he had misinterpreted Olivia's behavior. While he felt neglected, she was struggling to connect with him. "Have you tried talking to him about it?" Sophie suggested. Olivia let out a bitter laugh. "I've tried, but every time I bring it up, he changes the subject or says it's fine. It's not okay, Sophie. I'm losing my husband and I don't know what to do." The tears that Olivia had been holding back until then finally fell. Sophie hugged her, offering silent comfort. Daniel, hiding in the closet, felt his world falling apart. The letter in his pocket now seemed like a dead weight, a testament to his own blindness. He had been so focused on his own insecurities that he had failed to see Olivia's suffering. As the two women continued to talk, Daniel made a silent promise to himself. He would come out of that closet, face his insecurities, and fight for his marriage. Because now he knew. Olivia loved him as much as he loved her. They just needed to find a way back to each other. The monotonous hum of the washing machine filled the small laundry room, but it wasn't enough to drown out Olivia's restrained sobs. Daniel, still hiding in the closet, felt each one like a stab in the chest. Guilt consumed him, mixed with a growing sense of shame for witnessing such an intimate and vulnerable moment of his wife. Sophie, sitting next to Olivia on the cold floor of the laundry room, ran her hand gently over her friend's back in a gesture of comfort. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken emotions. "Liv." Sophie finally broke the silence, her voice gentle. "You need to tell me what's going on. I've never seen you like this before." Olivia lifted her face, her red, swollen eyes meeting Sophie's. She took a deep breath, as if to gather herself together. She took a deep breath, as if gathering her courage for the words that would come next. "It's like I'm disappearing, Sophie," Olivia began, her voice almost a whisper. "Not just for Daniel, but for myself too." Daniel felt his heart squeeze. How had he not realized how deep Olivia's pain was? "What do you mean?" Sophie asked, leaning closer. Olivia ran a hand through her hair, a gesture Daniel recognized as a sign of her anxiety. "Do you remember when Daniel and I first met? How inseparable we were. How he looked at me as if I were the only person in the world." Sophie nodded, a small nostalgic smile on her lips. You were the golden couple. Everyone envied what you had. Exactly, Olivia continued, her voice taking on a bitter tone. We did. Past tense. Now it's like I'm invisible. Daniel spends hours at work, and when he's home, he barely looks at me. It's like I'm a ghost in my own life. Daniel felt a wave of shame wash over him. He had been so focused on his own insecurities that he hadn't realized how his actions were affecting Olivia. Have you tried talking to him about it? Sophie asked, echoing the question she had asked earlier. Olivia let out a humorless laugh. Talk? Sophie, I can barely hold his attention for 2 minutes. Whenever I try to start a serious conversation, he changes the subject or says everything's fine, but it's not all right. Nothing is fine. The tears returned to Olivia's eyes, silently running down her cheeks. You know what's worse? I find myself wondering if he still loves me. If he ever really loved me. Daniel had to stop himself from coming out of the closet right then and there. He wanted to shout that he loved her, that he had always loved her, but fear kept him paralyzed, trapped between the folded towels and clean sheets. Sophie hugged Olivia, letting her friend cry on her shoulder. Oh, Liv, I'm sure Daniel loves you. Maybe he's just going through something he doesn't know how to share. Olivia pulled away, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Maybe. Or maybe he's just tired of me. You know how I am, Sophie. Always so focused on work, always running from place to place. Maybe I've become boring. Don't say that, Sophie exclaimed, grabbing Olivia's hands. You're amazing, Liv. Smart, funny, beautiful. If Daniel doesn't see that, it's his problem, not yours. Olivia smiled weakly, grateful for her friend's support. Thank you, Sophie. But sometimes I wonder, what if it's too late? What if we've drifted so far apart that there's no going back? The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel, in his hiding place, felt as if the world was falling apart around him. He had never imagined that Olivia could feel like this, so insecure, so disposable. It was a perfect reflection of his own feelings, a cruel irony that made him question every decision he had made in recent months. It's not too late, Sophie finally said, her voice firm and determined. You two love each other, Liv. That's obvious to anyone who sees you together. Maybe you just need to remember that. Olivia nodded slowly, as if she wanted to believe her friend's words, but couldn't quite. I wish I could go back in time, you know? To those early days, when everything was new and exciting, when a simple look from Daniel made my heart soar. Who says you can't? Sophie smiled, an idea sparkling in her eyes. Maybe it's time to rekindle the flame, do something special, surprise Daniel. Like what? Olivia asked, a spark of hope in her voice. How about recreating your first date? Sophie suggested. That picnic in the park, remember? You told me all the details back then. A genuine smile lit up Olivia's face for the first time since she'd entered the laundry room. That would be perfect. But what if he doesn't want to go? He will, Sophie assured her. Trust me. Daniel may be distracted, but he loves you, Liv. He just needs a reminder of what you have. Daniel, still hiding, felt a mixture of emotions wash over him. Relief at knowing that Olivia still loved him, guilt at having made her doubt that love, and a renewed determination to put things right between them. The two friends continued talking, making plans for the surprise picnic. Daniel listened intently, memorizing every detail. He knew that when Olivia invited him, he would have to feign surprise, but his enthusiasm would be genuine. As Olivia and Sophie's voices drifted away, indicating that they were leaving the laundry room, Daniel allowed himself a moment's reflection. The conversation he had just witnessed had been a painful but necessary revelation. He realized that they were both struggling with the same insecurities, the same fears of losing each other. Carefully coming out of the closet, Daniel made a silent promise to himself and Olivia. He would strive to be the husband she deserved, to rekindle the flame that once burned so brightly between them. The farewell letter in his pocket now felt like a relic of a past he was determined to leave behind. With silent steps, Daniel left the laundry, his heart filled with a mixture of regret and hope. The road ahead would not be easy, but he was ready to fight for his marriage, for his love. Olivia's revelation had been the wake-up call he needed, and now, more than ever, he was determined not to let that love slip through his fingers. Daniel closed the bathroom door quietly, his heart heavy with the revelations he had just heard. The mirror reflected a man he barely recognized. Tired eyes, slumped shoulders, the shadow of an unshaven beard. He wondered when he had become this faded version of himself. He turned on the tap and splashed cold water on his face, as if he could wash away the guilt that consumed him. Olivia's words echoed in his mind. "It's like I'm disappearing." How had he not noticed? How had he allowed things to get to this point? Drying his face with a towel, Daniel found himself transported to a memory from a few months ago. It was a Friday evening, and he was sitting in his home office, eyes fixed on the computer screen, fingers typing furiously to finish an important report. Olivia appeared in the doorway, dressed to go out, a hopeful smile on her face. "Hey, love," she called softly. "I thought we could go out for dinner tonight. It's been a while since we went out." Daniel remembered looking at her briefly, feeling a twinge of guilt that he quickly stifled. "I'm sorry, Liv. I have to finish this. It's urgent. Maybe next week?" Olivia's smile faltered, but she nodded, understanding as ever. "Sure, no problem. Don't work too late, okay?" He mumbled a distracted reply, already turning his attention back to his work. Now, replaying the scene in his mind, Daniel realized how many next weeks had passed without him fulfilling his promise. Leaving the bathroom, Daniel wandered through the silent house. His steps took him to the bedroom, where a framed photo on the bedside table caught his eye. It was a picture of the two of them, taken during a walk in the park a few years ago. Olivia was laughing openly, her head thrown back in pure joy, while he hugged her from behind, his own face lit up by a smile that seemed to reach his eyes. Daniel picked up the photo, his fingers tracing the outline of Olivia's face. When had he last seen her laugh like that? When was the last time he himself had felt so light, so happy? The memory of that day in the park flooded his mind. It was a sunny Sunday, and they had decided to have an impromptu picnic. Olivia had prepared sandwiches and brought a bottle of wine, while he carried an old plaid blanket that had belonged to his grandmother. They found a perfect spot under a large tree, the grass soft under their feet. They spent hours there, talking, laughing, sharing dreams and plans for the future. In a particularly silly moment, Daniel started tickling Olivia, resulting in the laughter captured in the photo. "What happened to us?" Daniel whispered to the image, feeling a lump forming in his throat. He sat on the edge of the bed, the photo still in his hands, letting the memories wash over him. He remembered nights spent awake, talking about everything and nothing. Lazy Sunday mornings when they stayed in bed late, just enjoying each other's presence. Small gestures of affection, a cup of coffee left on the bedside table, an affectionate note hidden in a pocket, a surprise hug in the middle of the day. When had these things stopped? When had they allowed routine, work, and the pressures of everyday life to smother the flame that once burned so brightly between them? Daniel thought of the letter he had written earlier, now crumpled in his pocket. How close he had come to making a terrible mistake, to potentially destroying his marriage because of a misunderstanding. The irony didn't escape him. While he felt neglected and invisible, Olivia was experiencing exactly the same feelings. Getting up, Daniel walked over to the window. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He remembered how many sunsets he had missed over the last few months, locked in his office or stuck in traffic coming home late at night. "This has to change," he said to himself, his voice firm with a new determination. Daniel knew it wouldn't be easy. Years of ingrained habits and poor communication couldn't be undone overnight. But the conversation he had overheard between Olivia and Sophie had ignited something inside him. A spark of hope, a burning desire to regain what they had lost. He thought of Olivia's plan to recreate their first meeting. A genuine smile, the first in a long time, curved her lips. She still cared, still wanted to fight for them. And he would do the same. Daniel picked up his phone, opening the Notes app. He began to list all the things he loved about Olivia, all the special moments they had shared, all the reasons he had fallen in love with her in the first place. The list grew rapidly, filling the screen with precious memories and admirable qualities. As he wrote, Daniel felt something change inside him. The fog of self-pity and insecurity that had enveloped him for so long was beginning to dissipate, replaced by renewed clarity and a definite purpose. He loved Olivia, deeply, irrevocably, and it was time to show her that, not just with words, but with actions. He heard the front door open. Olivia was back. Daniel took a deep breath, putting his phone back in his pocket. It was time to start the change, to take the first step towards reconciliation. With his heart pounding in his chest, he left his room and went downstairs. It was time to fight for his marriage, to show Olivia that the man she had fallen in love with was still there, just a little lost, but ready to find his way back home. For her. Daniel's heart was racing as he descended the stairs. Each step seemed to bring him closer not only to Olivia, but to a crucial moment in their marriage. The air was full of possibility and apprehension. As he reached the foot of the stairs, he saw her. Olivia had her back to him, putting some groceries away in the fridge. Her movements were mechanical, as if she were operating on autopilot. Daniel felt a pang of guilt as he realized how tired she looked. Her shoulders slightly slumped under the weight of unshared worries. "Liv," he called softly, his voice almost a whisper. Olivia turned around, surprise evident in her eyes. For a brief moment, Daniel saw a flicker of hope cross her face, quickly replaced by a wary expression. "Hi, Dan," she replied, closing the fridge door. "I didn't know you were home." The formality in her voice was like a stab to Daniel's heart. When had they become so distant from each other? I was wondering if we could talk," he said, taking a hesitant step towards her. Olivia looked at him with a mixture of surprise and apprehension. "Of course," she replied, her voice betraying a slight tremble. "About what?" Daniel took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "About us," he said simply. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with years of unspoken words and repressed emotions. Olivia nodded slowly, gesturing for them to sit down at the kitchen table. As they settled down, Daniel noticed how Olivia's hands trembled slightly. He wanted to reach out and take her hands in his, but something stopped him. The gulf between them seemed too vast at that moment. "Liv," he began, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I'm sorry. I haven't been a good husband lately." Olivia looked at him, her eyes filling with unshed tears. "Dan, what's going on? You've been so distant." Daniel felt the weight of guilt in his chest. How could he explain without revealing that he had eavesdropped on their private conversation? How to express everything he was feeling? "I've lost myself," he admitted, his voice breaking. "I lost myself in work, in the pressures of everyday life. And in the process, I almost lost the most important thing in my life, you." Tears began to stream down Olivia's face, and this time, Daniel didn't hesitate. He reached out, holding her hand gently. "I've been so focused on my own insecurities," he continued, "that I didn't realize how it was affecting you. how it was affecting us. Olivia squeezed his hand, a sob escaping her lips. I thought you didn't love me anymore, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel's heart broke at those words. Oh, Liv, he said, pulling her closer. I've never stopped loving you. Not for a second. He hesitated for a moment, then decided to be completely honest. He took the crumpled letter out of his pocket and put it on the table. What's this? Olivia asked, confused. A letter, Daniel replied, his voice trembling. A goodbye letter I wrote today. Olivia's eyes widened in shock and pain. Daniel quickly continued. I was so lost, so convinced that you didn't love me anymore, that I thought about leaving. I thought that maybe, if I disappeared, you would realize what we had lost. Olivia picked up the letter with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the words quickly. Dan, she whispered, the pain evident in her voice. But then, Daniel continued, I realized how stupid and cowardly that would be. I realized that instead of running away, I needed to fight for us, for you. He knelt down beside her, taking her hands in his. Liv, I love you, more than anything in the world. And I'm sorry for making you doubt that, even for a moment. Olivia looked at him, her eyes a mixture of pain, relief, and love. I love you too, Dan, she said softly. But love isn't enough if you don't take care of it, if you don't nurture it every day. Daniel nodded, feeling the weight of truth in her words. You're right, and I want to do it. I want to fight for us, Liv. I want to reconnect with you, rediscover what made us fall in love in the first place. A small smile appeared on Olivia's lips. I want that too, she admitted. But how do we do that? How do we go back to the way we were? Daniel smiled, remembering the plan he had overheard Olivia and Sophie discussing. How about we start by reminiscing about our first date, he suggested, pretending that the idea had just occurred to him. Olivia's eyes lit up with surprise and joy. Do you remember? How could I forget? Daniel replied, his smile widening. The picnic in the park, the cheap wine, the sandwiches you made. Olivia laughed, the genuine musical sound filling the kitchen. Those sandwiches were awful. They were the best sandwiches I've ever had, Daniel declared solemnly, making Olivia laugh even more. For a moment they stood there, laughing together, the tension of the last few months slowly dissipating. When the laughter subsided, Daniel looked into Olivia's eyes, seeing in them a reflection of the love he felt. Liv, he said softly, I know we have a lot of work ahead of us. I know it won't be easy to get through all this, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Are you with me on this? Olivia looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing up his words, assessing his sincerity. Then, slowly, she nodded. I am, she replied, her voice firm. We're in this together, Dan, for better or worse, remember? Daniel felt his heart expand with love and gratitude. He leaned in, kissing Olivia softly, sealing his silent promise to fight for her love. When they parted, they both had tears in their eyes, but this time, they were tears of hope and renewal. The road ahead would be challenging, but they would face it together, rediscovering each other and the love that brought them together in the first place. That night, as they prepared for bed, Daniel and Olivia felt closer than they had been in months. The heartfelt conversation had opened a door, allowing light to enter their relationship again. It was only the beginning, but it was a beginning full of promise and possibility. The next morning brought with it a sense of renewal. Daniel woke up to the first rays of sunlight seeping through the curtains, finding Olivia still asleep beside him. For a moment, he stood there, watching the gentle movement of her breathing, the soft lines of her sleep-relaxed face. It was as if he was seeing her for the first time in months. Carefully, so as not to wake her, Daniel got up and went to the kitchen. He decided to prepare breakfast, something he hadn't done for a long time. As the kettle bubbled away and the smell of freshly baked toast filled the air, he reflected on their conversation the night before. They had taken an important first step, but Daniel knew there was still a long way to go. The wounds caused by months of estrangement and misunderstandings wouldn't heal overnight. Olivia entered the kitchen a few minutes later, her eyes still sleepy, but with a sparkle that Daniel hadn't seen for a long time. "Good morning," she said softly, a small smile playing on her lips. "Good morning, Liv," Daniel replied, handing her a cup of coffee. "I hope you still like it with a spoonful of sugar and a touch of cinnamon." Olivia's smile widened. "You remembered." "Of course I did," Daniel said, feeling encouraged. "I'm trying to remember all the little things that make you, well, you." They sat at the kitchen table, the silence between them comfortable for the first time in months. As they ate, Daniel plucked up the courage to broach the subject he had spent the night thinking about. "Liv," he began, placing his coffee cup on the table. "I've been thinking. Maybe we need professional help to get over this." Olivia looked at him, surprise evident in her eyes. "You mean couples therapy?" Daniel nodded, feeling nervous but determined. "Yes. I think it could help us process everything that's happened and learn to communicate better." For a moment, Olivia was silent, and Daniel feared he had suggested the wrong thing. But then, to his relief, she reached out and took his hand on the table. "I think that's a great idea, Dan," she said, her voice full of emotion. "It shows how committed you are to making this work." Daniel felt a wave of relief and gratitude. "I am, Liv. More than ever." They spent the morning researching therapists in the area, reading reviews and comparing approaches. It was a process that made them feel united, working together towards a common goal. In the middle of the afternoon, Olivia received a message from Sophie, asking how things were going. Daniel noticed the hesitation on her face. "You can tell her," he said softly. "I know that Sophie is your best friend, and that you trust her." Olivia looked at him gratefully. "Thank you, Dan. That means a lot to me." While Olivia was replying to the message, Daniel decided to do something he had been putting off for a long time. He picked up his phone and called his friend Kevin. "Dan, man, long time no see!" Kevin's cheerful voice sounded on the other end of the line. "Hey, Kev," Daniel replied, feeling a little guilty for having neglected their friendship for so long. "How are you?" There was a pause on the other end. "To be honest, not too well," Kevin admitted. "Sarah and I are going through a difficult phase." Daniel felt a twinge of empathy. "I'm sorry to hear that, man. Do you want to talk about it?" Kevin hesitated for a moment before getting something off his chest. He talked about the distance that had built up between him and Sarah, about the constant fights and the feeling that they were drifting further apart. "Sometimes," Kevin confessed, his voice low, "I find myself thinking about other women. I haven't done anything, but the thought is there, you know." Daniel felt a shiver run down his spine. How many times had he himself been on the edge of that precipice? "Kev," he said, choosing his words carefully, "I understand. Olivia and I went through something similar recently." "Really?" Kevin asked, surprised. "You always seemed so perfect together." Daniel laughed humorlessly. "Far from it. In fact, we came very close to breaking up." He told Kevin about the last few months, about the distance that had grown between them, about the conversation they'd had the night before, and the decision to seek therapy. "Wow," Kevin said when Daniel had finished. "That gives me hope, you know? If you guys made it through, maybe Sarah and I can too." "You can," Daniel said with conviction. "But it's going to take work, Kev. on both sides. They continued talking for a few more minutes, with Daniel offering advice and support. When he hung up, he felt strangely light, as if helping Kevin had somehow solidified his own resolve. Olivia entered the room, a hesitant smile on her face. "Hey," she said softly. "I found something that might help us." She showed Daniel a digital flyer for a couples workshop that would be taking place next weekend. "It's a 2-day retreat," she explained, focused on reconnection and communication. Daniel felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. The idea of spending 2 whole days working on his relationship was both daunting and exciting. "Sounds perfect," he said, pulling Olivia into a hug. "Let's do it." That night, as they prepared for bed, there was a different energy in the air, a sense of hope and possibility that they hadn't felt for a long time. "Dan," Olivia called softly in the darkness of the bedroom. "Yes, Liv?" "I'm proud of us," she said, her voice full of emotion. "For not giving up. For fighting for us." Daniel felt his heart fill with love and gratitude. He turned to her, meeting her eyes in the dim light. "I am too," he replied, his voice hoarse with emotion. "And I promise I'll keep fighting. Every day." Olivia snuggled closer to him, and Daniel wrapped his arms around her. There, in the silence of the night, they silently sealed their commitment to start again, to rediscover the love that had brought them together, and to build a future together, stronger and more united than ever. The sun was shining brightly in the Texas sky, and the gentle July breeze carried with it the scent of freshly cut grass. Daniel and Olivia were on their way to the couple's workshop, both nervous but eager to begin this new phase in their relationship. The car was full of anticipation, and the soft music playing on the radio seemed to reflect the mood of hope that enveloped them. "Are you ready for this?" Daniel asked, looking at Olivia, who was concentrating on the road. She smiled, a hesitant but genuine smile. "I think so. I'm a bit nervous, but also excited. I feel like we need this." "Me too," Daniel replied, his hand moving to grasp hers. "We'll go together, like we always have." The trip was marked by conversations about their expectations for the workshop. They talked about the challenges they had faced and how they hoped this experience would help them reconnect. After a few hours, they finally arrived at the retreat site, a beautiful estate surrounded by tall trees and colorful flowers. The space looked welcoming, with a large wooden house and several outdoor areas for activities. As they entered, they were greeted by a friendly couple, the workshop facilitators, Sarah and Lucas. They both had a twinkle in their eyes and a contagious energy that immediately put Daniel and Olivia at ease. "Welcome. We're so happy you're here," Sarah said, offering them a warm smile. "This is a safe space to explore your relationship and learn more about each other." Daniel and Olivia exchanged nervous but also hopeful glances. They were guided to a cozy living room where they would meet the other participating couples. As they settled in, Daniel noticed that there were a variety of couples there, of different ages and stages of their relationship. Some seemed nervous, while others seemed more at ease, already laughing and talking to each other. "It's good to see we're not alone," Olivia murmured, looking around. "Exactly," Daniel agreed. "We're all here to learn and grow." The workshop began with a group dynamic, where everyone introduced themselves and shared a little about their stories. Daniel and Olivia listened attentively to the struggles and triumphs of other couples, feeling increasingly connected to them. When it was Daniel and Olivia's turn, he took a deep breath. "Hi, I'm Daniel, and this is my wife, Olivia. We've been together for 5 years," he began. "Recently, we've faced some challenges in our relationship, but we decided to fight for ourselves, and we're here to reconnect." The empathy in the eyes of the other couples was palpable. Many nodded, acknowledging the struggle Daniel and Olivia were facing. "It's brave of you to share this," an older woman said. "We all go through difficult times. The important thing is that we're here, trying to get better." During the first day, various activities were proposed, from communication exercises to dynamics that encouraged vulnerability and emotional connection. Daniel and Olivia felt challenged, but at the same time, the experience brought them closer together with each exercise. At dinner time, sitting at a long table with the other couples, Daniel found himself laughing and chatting, relieved to see Olivia so involved and happy. She shared funny stories about moments in their life together, and Daniel couldn't help but admire her ability to make others laugh. After dinner, the group gathered in a circle around a campfire. The atmosphere was magical, with the flames dancing and lighting up the faces of the participants. Sarah and Lucas led a reflection activity, where each couple had to share a special moment that brought them together. When it was Daniel and Olivia's turn, Daniel took her hand, feeling the connection between them. "One moment that will always be special to us was when we took a trip to the beach in our first year of marriage," he began. "It was a perfect weekend, full of laughter and exploration. I remember looking at Olivia and knowing I was exactly where I was supposed to be." Olivia smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "And I remember the little things," she added. "The walks in the sand, the conversations under the stars. Everything seemed so light and full of love." The sincerity in her words touched the other couples, who smiled and nodded in understanding. The vulnerability that Daniel and Olivia shared brought them even closer together. After the activity, as everyone dispersed to their cabins, Daniel and Olivia walked side by side, reflecting on the day. "That was amazing," Olivia said, looking at him with a beaming smile. "I feel like we're really reconnecting." "Me too," Daniel replied, slipping his arm around her shoulders. "It's good to see that we're not alone in this." That night, in the hours that followed, as they prepared for bed, Daniel felt a mixture of emotions. He was excited about the changes that were taking place in their relationship, but there was also a sense of nostalgia as he remembered how things had been before. "Dan?" Olivia called out softly. "Yes, Liv?" "Have you ever wondered how all this started? How we let these things get away from us?" she asked, her voice heavy with thought. Daniel turned to her, thinking about the words he was choosing. "Yes, many times. I remember how easy everything was in the beginning. But life happens, and sometimes we lose our way. I want us to know how to find our way back to each other," Olivia said firmly. "I don't want that to happen again." "Me neither," Daniel promised. "We're in this together." That night, as they snuggled under the covers, Daniel realized that, despite the challenges they had faced, there was a new sense of hope and determination between them. The workshop was only the beginning of a long road, but they were ready to walk it together. As the sounds of the trees swaying in the wind and the crackling of the campfire echoed in the background, Daniel and Olivia closed their eyes, feeling each other's presence, more connected than ever. And so, amidst the beauty of the night, they drifted off to sleep, dreaming of a future filled with love and renewal. The morning sun illuminated the retreat, and the atmosphere was full of renewed energy. Daniel and Olivia woke up with a new enthusiasm, ready to face the second day of the couple's workshop. After a breakfast full of conversation and laughter, the group gathered for the day's activities. The facilitator, Lucas, announced that the morning would be dedicated to communication exercises. Daniel and Olivia sat facing each other, the tension between them softened by the experience they had shared so far. "Today, we're going to work on how to express our feelings honestly and respectfully," Lucas explained. "Communication is the key to connection." Daniel looked into Olivia's eyes, feeling the warmth of her presence. He was determined to use this opportunity to open his heart even further. "Olivia," he began, "I want you to know that I'm here to listen to everything you have to say. Please tell me how you feel." Olivia hesitated for a moment, but then took a deep breath, as if preparing to dive into cold water. "I've felt lonely, Dan," she said, her voice trembling. "Over the last few months, you seem to be more focused on work and your own worries than on us. It made me feel like I wasn't important." Every word Olivia spoke hit Daniel like an arrow. He remembered moments when he was so absorbed in his own insecurities that he couldn't see the pain he was causing her. "I'm sorry, Liv," he replied, the sincerity in his voice shining through. "It was never my intention to make you feel that way. I was so lost in myself that I didn't realize how much you were suffering." Olivia's expression softened a little. "I know you didn't mean it, but it was hard, and I didn't know how to reach you. I promise I'll try harder to be more present," Daniel said, his voice firm. "I don't want you to feel that way again." They continued to communicate, sharing feelings and concerns, each listening carefully to the other. With each word, the barrier that had formed between them dissipated. After the activity, the group was invited to take a break. Daniel and Olivia moved a little away, taking a seat on a stone wall that surrounded a small lake. The setting was serene, with the reflection of the trees in the calm water. "Do you remember how we started?" Daniel asked, breaking the silence. "That picnic in the park?" Olivia smiled, a nostalgic gleam in her eyes. "Yes, you and your tickling. I could hardly stop laughing." "I just wanted to see you smile," Daniel said, remembering the joy he had felt that day. "And I realized that while I was trying to make you happy, I ended up forgetting to take care of us." Olivia looked at him, her gaze intense. "You're right, Dan. I've overlooked the little things too. What can we do to change that?" "We can make a compromise," Daniel suggested. "One day a week just for us. No work, no distractions. Just the two of us, like at the beginning." Olivia's eyes lit up at the idea. That would be wonderful. A day to reconnect and remember what brought us together. As they talked, Daniel couldn't help but notice how the connection between them was growing stronger. It was as if they were rediscovering each other, layer by layer. But then something changed in Olivia's expression. She looked thoughtful, hesitant. "Dan, there's something I need to tell you." Daniel's heart raced. "What is it, Liv?" "Last night, Sophie told me something," Olivia began, her voice hesitant. She's in love with you." Daniel's world stopped. The revelation was like a bucket of cold water, and he felt the tension grow between them. "What? Sophie? But that doesn't make sense." "I know," Olivia replied, her eyes watering. "She said she couldn't hide her feelings any longer, and I didn't know if I should tell you, but I didn't want you to be left in the dark." Daniel felt a whirlwind of emotions. He had always considered Sophie a close friend, but he had never considered anything beyond that. "Liv, I've never looked at her like that. My heart is yours." Olivia nodded, but the insecurity was still present in her gaze. "I trust you, Dan, but it confused me. I don't want you to feel pressured. Sophie's a good friend, but what if you're attracted to her in some way?" "I'm not like that," Daniel replied firmly. "I love you, and I'm here fighting for us. There's no room for anyone else in my heart." Olivia looked at him, her expression slowly softening. "I'm sorry for bringing this up. I just needed you to know." "I appreciate you being honest with me," Daniel said, wrapping his hand around hers. "And I promise I'll open up to you more. I don't want you to doubt me again." The tension between them began to ease, and Daniel felt a wave of relief. "Let's focus on what we have. Don't let this divert us from our path." "You're right," Olivia agreed, a small smile forming on her lips. "Let's reconnect and remember what really matters." Back in the group, the activities continued, and Daniel and Olivia got involved with renewed enthusiasm. With each exercise, they felt closer, more connected, as if they were rebuilding the foundations of their relationship. At the end of the day, as the sun was setting, Daniel and Olivia joined the other couples in a circle around the campfire. The shared stories, laughter, and tears brought them closer together. When it was their turn, Daniel held Olivia's hand, looking into her eyes. "We've struggled a lot, but I'm determined to make this work. Every day, every moment, I want you to know that you're my priority. I want us to get through this together." Olivia's gaze was full of love and determination. "And I want that too, Dan. I'm willing to fight for us." With the warmth of the fire illuminating their faces, Daniel and Olivia sealed their silent promise. The journey wouldn't be easy, but they were ready to face any challenge together. That night, as they snuggled under the covers, Daniel felt a deep sense of gratitude for being by Olivia's side. He knew that difficulties still lay ahead, but the connection they had rediscovered was stronger than any obstacle they might face. With their arms wrapped around each other, they closed their eyes, ready to face tomorrow together, one day at a time, more united than ever. The journey of reconciliation had only just begun, but Daniel and Olivia were determined to move forward, side by side, in search of a future full of love and understanding. Did this narrative stir your emotions? Don't forget to express your approval with a like. Take advantage of the Super Thanks feature, available just below the video, to offer direct support to the channel and contribute to the production of more fascinating content. Subscribe and remember to activate the bell to stay up to date with all the latest updates. And attention, a new exciting story is already ready to be displayed on your screen. Your participation means a lot to me, and I hope to count on your presence soon. Thank you very much for dedicating your time to this video.